anybody, but a lot of local leaders, especially at the county level, your local township leaders, local electeds, they've never dealt with this stuff before, right? They've never dealt with any energy generation, so it's new to a lot of people. I think it requires communities being knowledgeable and knowing what's coming, knowing what's coming and being prepared for that conversation. Because it's hard for a lot of people who've never, 5 years ago I had no idea about any of this stuff too. I mean, I wouldn't have known what, if the solar developer came knocking on my door and said, hey, we're gonna, this is what the agreement looks like, I would have no idea, right? I wouldn't have had any idea. So I think it's really, really important to educate and get some knowledge over to your local leaders too. Because at the end of the day, they're gonna be doing votes on this, they're gonna be pulling the trigger on this stuff. They're gonna have, I think, the most direct input to it.
I got a question. Why are these developers leasing instead of purchasing?
That I don't know. Do people want them to purchase? Out of curiosity. I don't mean to ask a question back, but
It's just a question. It seems like it'd be a lot cheaper to buy than to use.
especially at the rates that they're supposedly leasing. It's amazing as it is, I've actually never been asked that question before. I will ask. I'll have to find an answer to that. I don't know.
Any other questions for Scott? I really think we kind of accomplished what we wanted to do, is that was get some information out there, and kind of what Scott said at the end is kind of the main purpose of this. Is we really want to get this out to the leadership in the county and the state that are going to be making these decisions in the next few years, so that they can make informed decisions. That's really the main purpose of this. And I want to thank you for coming and doing this. I think you did a great job.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
I guess the other thing we're kind of looking for, as far as from a Farm Bureau standpoint, and I'm going to assume from the Farmers Union standpoint, is we'd like to get some feedback. I mean, is there something we can do as organizations to get you more information, get more information to the county leadership, state leaderships, federal leaderships, whatever? We need to know that from you folks, and see if we want to have some more meetings similar to this, or we need to hear from you, and give us some direction on what you want us to do. This is a really new thing, like was kind of brought up, and people are really struggling on which directions things should go. And we want to make sure that we make decisions that are not only going to benefit us, but are going to benefit the next generations. And that's my biggest worry when I see what's going on with this, is looking at the big picture down the road. What are we going to leave those people with? And I think there's some huge gaps there that we have to figure out as a society. But we got to do it together. So.
And I hope, one of the messages too. This probably is not the last time you're going to deal with this too. I mean, in this area, right? Craig, you had mentioned a couple of other projects. Some rumors south of here too, and this is probably not the only project, and it's probably not the last time that I think folks are going to be dealing with this. So it makes sense to try and be as knowledgeable about it up front as possible, because it probably is not the last time here.
Right, I agree. So if we don't have any other questions, go ahead.
So are there laws that prohibit a project, I don't care, 1,000, 2,000 acres, from selling directly to a municipality, other than the fact that they probably have a contract to buy it from someone else? I mean, are there laws that prohibit that? It just, again, getting back to transmission lines and putting up bigger wires and bigger poles, is there any laws or regulations that prohibit that?
Not to my knowledge, but again, you have a system set up now where it probably makes the most sense for folks to buy power, from that larger system, because you've built economies of scale at such a level that's where I think you can get your cheapest power from.
So we're part of Maryland.
Yeah.
Maryland generates electricity
prevent, there are policies that prevent exactly what you're talking about. I've called it community solar in the past, right? It's locally sited stuff, 20 acres, smaller stuff, that individuals in the community or the community writ large can contract directly with the developer to do. There are some barriers in Wisconsin to doing it, and I think there is some resistance to that because it involves private development as opposed to utility side of development. So that again gets back to, do we want to take advantage of this technology at a smaller scale, or do we want to continue to build it at an industrial utility scale? I would lean towards trying to take advantage of the smaller scale stuff. It makes all the sense in the world to me. If the community has a business park or an industrial park, you've got 20 acres sitting there, you've got all of your demand for energy really sitting in that park. Why not site some of this stuff right there? Then you don't have to run it on a transmission line 20 miles, and you can run it right there. But
You get 14 cents, you get retail price reduction.
right.
You get 14 cents, which is 3 cents on the local co-op or something. Because the other.
There are barriers to that. So,
One other question I had from somebody that couldn't be here today, it was kind of almost a three-part question, but I'm wondering about larger solar farm panels going on agricultural, Ag 1 zone land. What does that do to the future zoning of that property? Was part of the question. The other part of the question, what about the farmland preservation credits that are tied with that land? And third was, how are they going to, as a township, county, state, tax that land in the future once it's in solar panels?
yeah. So the first one was on zoning of land.
Yeah.
Essentially, you'd have conditional use for it for the duration of the solar farm's life. Once those solar panels come off, it goes back to ag land, essentially. At least that is the promise and that is the goal.
So with the solar panels on, it stays Ag 1, zoned Ag 1.
Essentially, yes. And then tax treatment of
Yeah,
it?
well, the farmland preservation credit, what happens to that, for that acreage?
Farmland preservation drops away from that, I believe. I don't think you can, I might have to check on that specifically. I'll check on it specifically, but I don't believe you can combine, I don't think you can combine farmland preservation with utility energy generation. I think it moves into a different category for tax purposes. Because utility scale generation is taxed at the state level, and then the tax receipts are obviously much higher, and they fall back down to the local municipalities and county level. I have to check on the preservation credit specifically though.
One question that I've gotten repeatedly from farmers is removal of that land from production. You touched on that a little bit. And some farmers have expressed they were opposed to the solar panel, but they were opposed to, land being taken out of production. And part of the question was, are there places in the country where you're seeing where you're having either raising vegetables or something else under the panels?
They're toying with it. It gets more expensive as you get higher off the ground, right? Especially at an industrial utility scale like that. You use more material, it gets more complicated the further up the ground you get, and you need space to be able to do any of that stuff, right? So I don't have a ton of hope that that's going to be the case. I think the version that you see right now is probably the version that's going to be dominant in the future going forward. However, there are some people that are getting more, getting a little bit more innovative with it. And again, I will tell you, the smaller your project gets, I think the more flexible and innovative you can be with it. You don't necessarily have to follow that huge cookie cutter method that utility scale developers are going with it right now. And that they do that for a reason, right? I mean, they have economies of scale and they have a large project to do. But smaller scale solar, I think you can be a little bit more flexible and you can have a little bit more innovation with it.
On places where they've already established some large solar farms in Wisconsin, what has that done to the property values of the people that live in that area, but maybe don't own land, solar panels on?
Yeah, I think probably the proper answer to that is we're not sure yet either. Again, this is new enough where I don't think that you can collect enough local property to really take a look at it. I'm of the belief that they do good neighbor payments for a reason. They pay you to be surrounded by those panels because probably there's going to be some negative consequences to your property there. And it seems difficult to me, just as an individual, as a person, I'm actually looking for property in a home right now. I'm in the market trying to find something affordable. That's not very good right now to be doing that. I don't know that I would look at a house surrounded on 3 sides by solar panels. I'm not sure, just to be totally honest with you. So, does that affect somebody's resale value? I don't know. You guys can tell me on that one. I haven't seen anything compelling that tells you one thing or the other yet, to be totally honest.
Question.
Yes, sir.
When does the Public Service Commission get involved in this? And at what scale do you get to where they dominate your business?
I don't know exactly where the specific project is in the development process yet. I don't know you guys, I don't know if anybody, are they public with it yet, or?
I'm looking at a former creamery in Rice Lake that had a steam line that heated downtown, and they got to the point where Public Service Commission came in and said, if you either have to stop the steam line, or we're gonna take the whole cooperative over and run it from the public service side of it.
Really?
And they dropped the steam line. So,
I'd be interested to know a little more about that. I can tell you on the solar side of things, essentially the developer will put the project together. They'll get all of their agreements in order, they'll get their land together, make sure they have a whole project, and from there, they will essentially, and obviously work with local communities on any kind of joint development agreement, that kind of thing. And from there, they'll essentially apply to the PSC for the proper permits. That permitting takes anywhere from a year to longer than that to go through that process. The PSC holds, public hearings in areas, and they try and get as much public input as possible. But that process typically takes about a year after a developer will go to the PSC and seek official permission.
what size of the Public Service Commission want to be involved?
At what size? How do you mean? Over 100. Anything over 100 megawatts, the 3 public service commissioners are ultimately probably going to they're going to be able to get the thumb up or the thumb down on any project.
Just to maybe, I don't know, to help answer your question now, I went on the Public Service Commission's website this afternoon, and they have the projects listed on there. There was about 16 projects. 12 of the 16 are solar farms that are over 100 megawatt right now. Some of those, it said that they have been approved. Some of them have not yet been, but that's what was on there.
The Public Service Commission is essentially, they're not just waiting, but developers go to the PSC when they're ready on a project and apply essentially for that permission, right? So the PSC, its proactive role, I think is pretty limited. They're waiting for projects, right? And they're waiting to give their input essentially on these projects.
I thought one thing that was interesting on the site, and I didn't spend a lot of time reading through all of it, but you can open up small windows of details of what the applications are. It was really interesting, in my opinion anyway. Some of them listed the number of acres that were going to be covered by these solar farms, and they would identify what type of land it was. And they use terms like prime ag land. For the prime ag land, out of the 12 projects that are at the PSC right now, is 9,674 acres of prime farmland. There was 2 projects that they didn't list what the acres were or what type of acres there's 1,882 acres of forested land that are being proposed to have solar panels on. and then, 15,833 acres that were listed as acres but didn't identify what type of land they were going on. Just to give you an idea of what's on there. It's all public information. You can go on their website and find it. So. Anything else?
Anything else, Al?
You know, we have some, projects, comes on the edge one, how many people have been back? My point being is, they're rural, they're, any type of land, in terms of being the eyesore, you're not gonna buy a house. You're not gonna house, it's very expensive around the center.
I am not looking at this area, I'll be honest. I'd like to be.
My point is, no matter where you're looking, you're not gonna see a solar field next to residential.
Sure.
Well, I'd like to thank Scott for coming up.
All right.
Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you guys very much.
You know, if you want to hang around a little bit, have some discussions and other questions or something, I think some of us will stay and hang around, and not that we have answers, but we'll, whatever. So.